Haxorus is one of those sleeper picks that I've wanted to try using but never quite was able to figure out on my own. But I've done some research, I've done some digging, and I think I've come up with a few different options that might be fun to try out on this thing. So let's dive into the Axe Face Dragon from Generation 5, Haxorus. Look at those stats. I'm going to give you a second there just to admire them. Okay, second's over. So we got 76 HP, 147 attack, 90 defense, 60 special attack, 70 special defense, and 97 speed. They knew what they were doing when they put Haxorus together. They gave it great attack to match that axe on its face, and then relatively decent speed with that 97. And looking at both the attack and speed stats, this is going to be great because this thing wants to sweep. With that base 147 attack, you don't even need to run Inanimate Nature to hit just under 200 points. You go max investment on this thing and you hit 199 points. That's relatively nice. And without a Jolly Nature too, you hit 149 speed with max investment. That's wonderful because you can play around with that. And if you want to slap a Jolly Nature on this thing, you could easily hit 163. Now, that's great for Undertale because you're outspeeding just about anything that doesn't have a speed boost, which is going to be incredibly handy. And on top of that, if you wanted to run an Inanimate Nature instead of a neutral nature, you hit 218 points. Haxorus is going to do damage. This thing is also a pure dragon type, which means we don't have many weaknesses to worry about while having a few decent resistances to have at our disposal. We resist electric, grass, fire, and water, all of which are common types, and then we're weak to dragon, ice, and fairy. So that is relatively nice at the end of the day. It's nice and simple. You don't have to worry about a huge dynamic type chart for Haxorus. You just got to remember 3 types are bad, 4 types are great. And on top of that, when it comes to dragon type stab, you hit a lot of things neutrally, which could be relatively nice because you can use coverage moves to hit what dragon does not hit super effectively. As far as Haxorus's abilities go, this thing was blessed with 3 solid abilities in the form of Rivalry, Mold Breaker, and Unnerve. Rivalry is a fun ability because when Haxorus is battling against a Pokemon that is the same gender as it, its attacks do an extra 25% in power, but on the flip side, when it's battling against a opposite gendered Pokemon, its attacks only do 75%, so it is a little bit of risk and reward that you do have to assess when in battle. But the nice thing here too is if you want to run a male Haxorus, well, Tornadus, Landorus, and Thundurus are all gender locked to male, so you could have a nice positive matchup into them and relive some of Haxorus's glory days from previous VGC formats. I want to say I took credit for that, but I didn't. Go watch Foul Sweet Gaming. They have more details on that. Now, on the flip side, Ogerpon is locked into being female, so if you want to have a little bit of more fun with dealing with opposing Ogerpons, you could consider running a female Haxorus instead. Moldbreaker is a great ability too because it allows Haxorus to bypass the effects of abilities of other Pokemon that would protect them from opposing moves. Say, for example, if you wanted to shut down a Oblivious user that would normally be immune to Taunt, you could bypass that and go for Taunt and then shut them down, and you could deny a Trick Room or a Swords Dance, anything that would normally work to their favor. Or, the more favorite of my examples, Earthquake Go Burr against Levitate Mon. You could do that too. And then finally, we have Unnerve, which just prevents the opponent's Pokemon from eating their berries. And while that doesn't seem necessarily the strongest ability, just look what Calyrex did to us back in VGC 2022. And there you go. Now, as far as some Terra options go for Haxorus, because this thing is Mono Dragon, you might want to mix things up a little bit, or you might want to just go double stab on the dragon option. I won't judge you either way. So a few Terra options that I thought of for this thing is we could go Terra Dragon for a double stab. We could go Terra Fire to protect us from being burned. We could go Terra Electric to prevent paralysis. And then finally, we could go Terra Steel, which does resist all of Haxorus's weaknesses while giving it a few extra defenses too. So that could be a relatively solid option to consider. Now let's talk about some movesets for this thing. Our first set here is going to be a speedy critical hit machine. What we're going to do here is we're going to take advantage of 2 different moves and the Scope Lens item. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pair these Scopelands up with Haxorus. This is going to increase our critical hit modifier from 1 to 2. All Pokemon naturally come into battle with a modifier of 1, which means they have a 4% chance roughly of landing a critical hit. The Scopelands is going to up that modifier from 1 to 2, which is therefore going to increase our odds from 4% to 12.5%. While that's a decent jump, it's not the most accurate jump for guaranteeing the critical hits, but that's okay because we now have access to Focus Energy. Focus Energy increases our critical hit modifier by 2. So if we didn't have the Scopelands and we were just going for straight Focus Energy, that would put us up to a modifier of 3. Once you hit a modifier of 3, you now have 50-50 odds of landing a critical hit. So when you have the Scopelands, in addition to Focus Energy, that's going to put us up to a modifier of 4. Once you hit a modifier of 4 and higher, you are guaranteed to land critical hits, which means Reflect and Aurora Veil will not be getting in your way when you're looking to do some damage. What we're going to do here with Haxorus is we're going to make this into a 2-turn setup, because what we're going to do is we're going to go Focus Energy with turn 1 to make sure that we land our critical hits, and then we're going to click Trailblaze. Trailblaze, while being a weaker move, is going to be guaranteed to increase our speed 1 stage, which means now, with some speed investment into our EVs, Haxorus is going to be outspeeding a lot of the game and landing critical hits, with not much going in the way of the opponent to help reduce the damage. Because when you land a critical hit, it doesn't matter if Haxorus is at -6, you're going to ignore your own attack drops and therefore gain the bonus damage effect from the critical hit and do, you guessed it, big damage. So what I was thinking here for the EVs is we can go 244 into the attack to hit 198. The critical hits will definitely make up for the lack of full investment on the attack front. And then we're going to go 148 EVs into our speed on a Jolly Nature to hit 149. When you hit +1 speed with that 149, that bumps you up to 223 points into speed, which allows you to outspeed base 150 Pokemon. And at that point, what we're going to do with the remaining EVs is just dump that into our HP to try to increase our bulk. Haxorus is a glassy boy, so helping keep it alive is going to be relatively nice. We can't run a Focus Sash because we're running the Scopelands, so making sure that we can live a hit or two might be kind of, important. So, as far as the remaining 2 moves go, I have Dragon Claw and Earthquake for coverage, because right now, we're going to take advantage of the fact that Dragon Claw does gain stab, but because Terastallization is a thing, we could change our Terra, and therefore we could open up our coverage options. Right now, between the combination of Dragon Claw and Trailblaze, Steel types do wall us, so we do have the Earthquake right there to make sure that we punish the Steel types, and honestly, Earthquake is a relatively nice move to have. If we wanted to, we could trade out one of these 2 moves for a move like, say, Iron Head or Poison Jab. Terra Steel, like I mentioned earlier on, is a really good option for Haxorus, but if we want to run Terra Poison just to deal with fairies, we could also do that. They're both base 80 power moves, which is relatively nice. And if we didn't want to run Earthquake because we're worried about hitting our partner, a nice alternative to get around Steel types is Close Combat. I didn't know Haxorus got Close Combat this generation, but man, that is deadly. Base 120 fighting type coverage and a guaranteed crit, sign me up. And like I said too, if we wanted to change our Terra, we definitely could do that. Terra Fire would be nice too, because we also don't have to worry about getting burned at that point. But I do like the idea of running maybe, say, Terra Poison and Poison Jab. This would also get around bulky grass types or, most fire types that want to become a grass type, especially if they've already popped the Terra button and gone Terra Grass. Well, now you have that nice stab Poison Jab off of Terra Poison to deal with them that way. But that's what I was thinking for this first set here with the critical hit set. Let's move on to the next 2. Our second set that we're looking at is a loaded dice set with Scale Shot. The nice thing here too is Haxorus at a Jolly Nature with 97 speed means it has plenty of speed tiers to work with. What I was thinking for this one is we're going to go with 116 EVs on a Jolly Nature to hit 145, and then when we hit +1 speed, we hit 217 points, which does allow us to outspeed Dragapult and Slower, which is going to be a nice little benchmark to be sitting at as well. And from there, what we're going to do is we're going to go max investment into our attack to hit 199, and then we're going to dump the rest of the EVs into our HP. So in this case, 140 EVs into our HP to hit 169. If you want to play around with that and invest into your defenses a little bit, you could do that too. What I originally had before sitting down to record this was actually 167 into the HP for a grand total of that, and then 12 points into the special defense to hit 92, and then the remaining 4 into the defense to bring it up to 111. You could do something like that as well. And what we're going to do here is we're going to use the loaded dice to guarantee that Scale Shot is going to hit a minimum of 4 hits, so long as the 90 accuracy doesn't work against us, because that is one thing that I have found when playing with Regulation E. When we're not dealing with fairy types, Scale Shot does have that awful gut clenching, or rather gut dropping sensation of missing from time to time because of the 90 accuracy. But when you do pull it off, you do get that -1 defense drop in favor of that +1 speed boost. So that is relatively nice. And plus, when you do have the minimum of 4 hits, you are doing more reliable damage compared to Dragon Claw, which is only base 80 power before stab. The nice thing here is when you hit that minimum of 4, you're getting a base power of 100 essentially, and having stab on that, which means you're looking at about 150, which means you could really justify running Terra Dragon on this thing if you wanted to double your stab, because each hit would therefore be a base 50 power. But if you want to run Terra Steel, Terra Fire, Terra Electric, or Terra Ground even, you could definitely do that. So the main idea here is we're going to get speed off with the Scale Shot. We're going to go with Iron Head to deal with the fairy types, because that is the biggest way of denying the Scale Shot, is being a fairy. So we can run either Iron Head or Poison Jab to deal with them, and therefore we could also match a corresponding Terra. I do like the idea of Terra Steel in this case, because then we are also resisting ice type attacks as well, which is a fairly common coverage option for a lot of Pokemon, so that could be nice. And plus, Icy Wind is just going to be ruining our day a little bit too with the speed drops, so at least being able to resist that could be nice too. And then we have Earthquake to round it out and then therefore hit Steel type super effectively. But like I mentioned with the critical hit set, we could alternatively run Close Combat as well to deal with Steel types that way. But I do like the idea of Earthquake a little bit better for this, because Scale Shot is already lowering our defense 1 stage. One way we could patch that up though is if we wanted to run a little bit of support to help nullify the amount of damage we're taking with our partner, we could use a redirection supporter like, say, Clefairy with Follow Me and Friend Guard, and then therefore we're taking only 75% of the amount of damage that we normally would, as opposed to the full 100% of the opposing moves coming our way. So we could do something like that. Mousehold also gets Friend Guard, so you could do that too. And the nice thing is both Clefairy and Mousehold, while also having Friend Guard, do get access to Helping Hand. So you can then get an extra boost in power with Haxorus with that 50% boost from Helping Hand, and let Haxorus just run wild. That's what I was mainly thinking for the second set. Let's move on into the third one. Our third and final set here is going to be a fast and furious, or rather, I guess, jovial, because we're running a Jolly Nature, max attack, max speed, invested Haxorus that is going to be increasing its offensive presence with either Sword Stance or Dragon Dance. The question is there, do you want to increase your attack 2 stages per use with Sword Stance, or do you want to increase your attack and speed 1 stage per use with Dragon Dance? Both boosting moves are great options for Haxorus, because it is going to be, regardless, increasing that base 147 attack to monstrous levels with very minimal usage of the boosting move. We're already at 199 points with max attack investment on that Jolly Nature, and this is just going to increase its offensive presence regardless. And the nice thing here too is when you do hit a +1 onto the speed, you do hit 244 points, which is a very respectable speed stat if you do want to run Dragon Dance. So regardless of which, though, we are going to run a Clear Amulet on Haxorus to prevent its stats from being lowered by opposing abilities and moves. And we're going to slap a Terra Fire attribute onto Haxorus to make sure that we don't have to worry about being burned, and then therefore losing out on that wonderful 199 points of raw damage. So as far as some move options go with Haxorus, what we could do here is we could run Dragon Claw for some decent stab. Because we're not able to run a loaded dice and a clearing melee at the same time, I definitely don't recommend running Scale Shot. But if you do want to take that odds of playing the RNG roulette and then going for multiple hits with Scale Shot, power to you. You're still increasing your speed, which is a nice thing to stack with Sword Stance if you wanted to. If you're running Dragon Dance, I don't recommend running Scale Shot. I recommend staying safe and going with Dragon Claw for the consistent damage and accuracy. Now, a nice alternative to close combat here is Low Kick. Low Kick uses the target's weight into its main calculation for doing damage, and there are a lot of heavy Pokemon out there, which means Low Kick can cap out to 120 base power, depending on what the opponent is, which means you could use this as a nice safe alternative to close combat. You don't have to worry about having your defenses lowered one stage each. But if you want the consistent raw 120 base fighting damage, you can still run close combat as well. Now, Poison Jab and Iron Head, I will continue to preach. They are great options for dealing with fairy types as well. And plus, if you wanted to, you could also increase the power of these moves with a Helping Hand support Pokemon. Regardless, Haxorus does need a turn of setup with either Sword Dance or Dragon Dance, which is a nice thing too because we can go back and use Clefairy with the Friend Guard ability to lower the amount of damage we'll take off spread hits, and we can also use Follow Me as a little bit of redirection. Regardless of which too, if you lead, say, like Friend Guard redirection support plus Haxorus and that Pokemon faints, that can set up a nice little strategy because that can get in Tornadus for free of cost. Tornadus is great here because it has access to Prankster and it also gets both Tailwind and Leer. So if you're running a Sword Stance set, you can instantly hit the speed button with Tailwind, or if you're running Sword Stance or Dragon Dance regardless, you could lower the target's defense stat with Leer, and then that way Haxorus can do even more raw damage, which is going to be wonderful. Now, another thing too with Haxorus is you also have plenty of other options at your disposal. If you're running a Sword Stance set, you could make a case for Trailblaze to increase your speed. And the nice thing here too is it is a grass type move, which means you can get a little bit of super effective damage in off of Urshifu Rapid Strike, which is definitely not the end of the world. You could run Earthquake and pair that with Mold Breaker to bypass Levitate mons, or if you're not worried about abilities getting in your way, you could make the case for running Rivalry to increase your attack damage against Pokemon with the same gender as you. So if you wanted to run a male Haxorus, that's a nice extra 25% against Landorus, Tornadus, Thundurus. And if you want to run a female Haxorus, that's a nice little extra boost of damage towards Ogerpon, Cresselia, and Enamorus, which is a nice matchup to have as well. And let's talk about some other coverage moves, especially since I did mention Cresselia. Haxorus does get access to Crunch, which is a great means of dealing super effective damage against Cresselia, especially where Cresselia and Dusclops are both really bulky Trick Room setters. If you want to get around that, you can have that extra boost of damage with Rivalry against Cresselia if you're running a female Haxorus, and then you can go for Crunch. Or if you just want to run the Mold Breaker and just not play with Rivalry, you can still take advantage of Crunch to deal with Dusclops. So that could be a relatively nice thing as well. And then another option too that Haxorus can take advantage of, because it does have the means of increasing its speed, whether it's Trailblaze or Dragon Dance or Scale Shot, you do get access to Rock Slide as well, which is some nice flinch RNG odds in your favor because it is a nice 30% chance, and plus it is doing a bit of spread damage to both targets. So if you're not sure who might have a Focus Sash, well, you don't have to worry about potentially landing a single target hit into a Focus Sash mon. You can just break that Focus Sash off of both potential candidates with a Rock Slide and then let Haxorus's partner go from there. So that could be a nice thing to keep in mind as well. And that's the main thoughts I had on the boosting Sword Stance or Dragon Dance Haxorus. Overall, I think Haxorus is going to be a fun Pokemon to try out, especially now that it does have access to Scale Shot and the loaded dice. It also has access to Close Combat and Focus Energy with a Scope Lens, which could be fun. And plus, you could always go with Old Faithful, simple max attack and speed investment, Sword Stance or Dragon Dance. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think of Haxorus down in the comments below, and let's get the conversation going.